All right, so let's get going. So my name is Jamie Duncan. I'm a cloud architect at Red Hat. I do all of the cloudy things, but a lot of the focus that I work on is automation. And the automation we do with Ansible, which has been brought up 10 or 12 times already this morning in various talks, and a lot of the automation we do with CloudForms. So today, that's what we're talking about. I did have a little introduction sentence or two that I wrote down, but the last speaker did all of it for us. That concept of what he was talking about, of what is, when you're putting together a project, when you're putting together a team, when we were talking about this panel when we got started, we really wondered, what is an automation project? And you say that, and you think that, of course, we all know what an automation project is, but when you really start peeling back that onion a couple of layers deep, it really becomes different things. Am I automating in user experiences? Am I automating my data center? Am I automating my networking stack? Am I trying to glue all those things together? Or do I just want to say that I've automated things and check a box and go on about my business? And all of those are potentially valid. So we put together a panel. It started out as 3 and it got to 5. We were hoping for a 6th, but it got a little too cozy up here. So I'm gonna give everyone, we'll start here on the left, or my left, or your left, and give everyone 30 seconds or a minute or so, and who you are, what you do, what you enjoy.
All right, great. Thanks, Jamie. Can you hear me? Yeah. All right, good. So I'm Coby Holloway. Sorry for the ridiculously long title on the screen. I run the cloud computing organization for a federal systems integrator called SAIC. The U.S. government is about 99.99% of our business. Been with SAIC about 10 years, started our own internal cloud journey about 6 years ago. We're really proud to say we were one of the first, if not the first, to move to a full-blown hybrid cloud within our own IT organization, and we built our practice from there. So really grateful to Red Hat to have the chance to talk about this really fun topic.
I think this is on, right?
Yeah,
okay.
You're good.
So good morning, everybody. My name's Evan Lee. I'm the CTO for the Department of Health and Human Services, Office of Inspector General. I'm fairly new in that role, been there for a couple months, but I'm responsible for looking at all the new technologies that's available to us and how do we utilize that to kind of modernize our platform. So,
cool.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chaudhuri. I work for a solution-based consulting company called Oteemo as automation lead, and my background spans commercial, nonprofit, and some federal work, and I've automated everything across multiple providers, and I've been proud to contribute to a lot of projects and in organizations throughout my career, and in my spare time I roast coffee.
Oh. Are we on?
Hello.
Hey, there you go. You're good. Check.
Rob Brown, Booz Allen, Hamilton. Really just a nerd.
Raise your hand if you're not a nerd.
Sorry.
Yeah, I thought so.
Work with a great team of engineers and a pretty contemporary leaning organizations. And a large part of our job is trying to truly automate all things, from the CI/CD process to just infrastructure, environment. This is sort of our MO and our goal, and have been successful in all of our endeavors.
Very cool.
Awesome. Yeah, my name is Justin Nemmers. I am the product owner of Ansible automation within Red Hat, and effectively that's just fancy talk for strategy, go-to-market, and product marketing for all automation strategy within Red Hat and external for a little product called Ansible.
Very cool. So just to point out 2 things before we dive into really the first question. Number 1, the SOC game on this stage is strong. Seriously, guys, can we hike a leg? Well, mostly strong, but Justin in particular, those are nice. Like, I want some of those. And second, the panel we put together up here, we are representing all aspects of any given project. We have the vendor and Justin. We have integrators, we have consultants, and then we actually have the agency, the customer. And so we're really representing the entire swath. So what I'm hoping we get out of this is some perspectives that we didn't anticipate having. If we get anything, I want that. So really kind of focusing in on what you see from your angle. And then how is that different from the guy beside you? And how does it complement, how does it compete with what you're going? So really getting into that, and again, into the keynote right before here, we have to define what an automation project is. So unfortunately, we're often defining things, what they are, by what they're not. So when you're stepping into an automation project, when you're working with a customer to figure out, we need to modernize, we need to automate, we need to insert this buzzword here, what are the biggest misconceptions you run into when you're in that initial discovery phase? And anyone chime in. Just the biggest, and I would love to like the misconceptions from the agency. You know, when you thought, or do you end up doing what you think you're going to do? Do you end up selling what you think you're going to sell? So what are the biggest misconceptions you run into? Somebody.
So I'll quickly, one of the things that we see a lot is a misunderstanding about the level of investment at the front end of an automation journey, right? So there's a significant hike to create those automations, right? Not just buying the tool, but putting the energy into really figuring out what you're going to automate, how to automate it. Over time, and that's typically years, that cost curve gets drugged down substantially, and you'll recover at some point in the future, and then you'll realize real benefits. But there's a bump at the front end.
So I think for me, from a federal agency standpoint, the biggest misconception is really that automation by itself is the answer, right? To me, it's really a piece of a larger picture that we need to look at, right? From all the stuff that we talked about earlier, right? How do we manage our data center networks, stuff like software application development, CI/CD, how do we get to the cloud? Automation is a piece of that, right? We need to look at the solution as a whole. As an agency, we normally kind of tend to go out and look for these silver bullet, one solution that can just buy something and put it in, set it up, and then we're done, right? To me, that's really the mindset that needs to change, that if we are moving down towards automation, it's a continuous process.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, automation can be perceived as a silver bullet sometimes, which it is not. You have to take an incremental approach. You have to have short-term wins and longer-term returns on the investment up front.
And I think that's a great follow-in. When you're talking about this, so that misconception, and I love that idea of that it's all we have to do, that once we've automated, we're done, right? Then we're all playing golf 3 days a week, and you don't really get there. So when you're in those discovery phases, and this is more for the vendors and the integrators and the consultants, how do you manage that expectation? How do you set it correctly from the get-go so they understand that, okay, automation is part of building out workflows, building out processes, but I have to have a workflow before I can automate the workflow. We get into that. How do I move my life from 7 spreadsheets into an actual automated thing?
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest misconceptions, kind of tailing the previous question into this one, that we frequently see is that organizations often believe that, oh, well, I have a team that automates things. And the biggest challenge that it ends up presenting is that it lacks the realization that ultimately IT is about control. We've had a number of speakers today talk about these different silos and these different teams, and they're all kind of doing their things. And those teams, as it turns out, they don't take too kindly to strangers showing up saying that they're going to be automated. And that's, I think, the biggest struggle that a lot of organizations encounter is when they've approached automation like that, not recognizing and not understanding that ultimately to be successful and to be continuous, something that is an absolute cycle from modernization to migration to CI/CD, all of these things really are a continuum. It's not just a single point in time. And the only way to really be successful with that is to look at your existing stuff, begin to automate it, but really it needs to be holistic. Everyone on the teams, everyone within these various organizations needs to be able to do this.
So yeah, leveraging like agile methodologies is a great first start, and treating your automation programs as such is probably a good first step, and treating code as code, because ultimately that's what it boils down to. Pairing with folks that, the fear of automation, the fear of losing your job, pairing with folks, illustrating to them the benefit, showing to them that benefit, training them is also a big win across a lot of teams that we've worked with. They can actually see those benefits. They can see the time that they're going to get back is enormous. And to that same point, usually working with that individual who is SSHing into that box and making those specific changes, pulling that back into a centralized CM orchestration tool set, and then showing them here's how we can do a dynamic inventory, here's how we can actually run a playbook or a recipe from a centralized center or a single source of truth, really does hammer home the fact across all of these teams. And then the adoption rate becomes their MO and their push forward.
Well, and also I just want to throw one little thing into that. What's also really fascinating about it is that there's a significant knowledge sharing aspect to good automation projects. Really, if you look at the fundamental tenet of DevOps, it's that other teams are able to kind of repeat and replay the types of things that your other components of the organization are doing. And a big challenge to that is that there typically is this pretty significant barrier between learning what other folks are doing. And that's a successful automation project will really play on the fact that everyone is kind of sharing within the overall automation. And sharing that knowledge such that you can now rely more on the dynamics of the team and less on the heroics of any one individual on the team.
Absolutely. You have to work against some of the throw it across the wall situations that you might encounter in organizations. It's a cultural shift. You have to accommodate for that. You basically have to work with all the folks that are involved in this on a day-to-day basis, set expectations and set metrics. What is success? How do you define success? And basically work through that one step at a time instead of going all out and saying, okay, this is going to solve everybody's problems. That doesn't usually work.
So the other thing I'd like to add from a Fed standpoint is that we don't really share well. We're used to kind of having our own little bound.
Wait, say that one more time a little louder. Let's get this on the record.
Yeah, we don't really share well. So I think it's sort of part of the responsibility of the vendors that are coming in to actually help us understand how do we actually share that code, right? How do we share the knowledge? How do we share the technology? The type of people that we need to bring in from the beginning so that they're part of your change, so that they can help you to be successful and support you in the long term.
Sure.
I'll say from an expectation management perspective, Jim, I think that was the initial question was, the way that we manage it at SAIC is we have a framework for entering into a cloud migration activity. We look at automation as being part and parcel with delivering cloud services, right? You can't really separate it out. So
Say that louder one more time.
yeah, you cannot separate automation and cloud. They're closely coupled. But when we talk to our customers, well, the first things we talk about early in the process, we'll do a workshop and we'll say, okay, here's the discovery activity that we have to go through for you to be able to create a useful automation. Here's all the stuff that we need to know about your applications, your operational processes, your technology, your culture, frankly, right? The security requirements of your organization. And when they see that, they go, okay, got it. This is going to, we have to put some energy into this. But then we make the value proposition really clear on the back end of that. And that's the beautiful thing about an automation project is it does create a new form of culture that's better than the culture that existed previously. And it forces you to really drill in and deeply understand your application environment.
Yeah, one of the things that I've run into with every customer I've ever worked with, anytime you start writing down a process, you start automating something, I like to call it, with all the customers I work, I call it being hit by a bus compliant. That if I'm hit by a bus tomorrow, my job can continue. The next guy can pick it up and do it. And it's a little bit of a laugh line, but it plays because that's really what we're doing. And the best way to be hit by a bus compliant for any process, for any piece of infrastructure, is to automate it. Automating forces me to document. Documentation forces it to be tribal knowledge and not individual knowledge. And if that's all you get out of, and if you don't get all the way to where you want to go, if you just get to the point where you've documented your processes, that's a win for almost every IT team on the planet. Because it's all stuck in that one guy's brain. And it's just an interesting thought, and I think it was Justin that brought it up initially. Kind of going into that, as we're managing these expectations, as we're deriving benefit from automation, because we can all agree that you do, what's the single biggest source of friction that you run into? If you had to say, and I'm going to put the caveat out there that you can't just talk about the curmudgeon that's on the networking team, because he's out there everywhere. Every company has the curmudgeon on the networking team. Without mentioning him or her, what's the biggest source of friction? Be it technological or be it personal, what's the biggest source of friction you run into?
I would actually say that you can have a great, to your point, having the team doing a workshop, that's great up front, but when the rubber meets the road, you need to actually truly understand what that Catalina.xml file really has inside it. I think that's becomes really the challenge, right? That's where you really need to work through, and that can become the biggest friction. Is especially as an integrator or a consultant coming in trying to work with this team that has been working so hard doing their processes this way. Let's sort of start extracting that information out of their head, showing them that what it can actually do. In my experience, has been the most challenging and the most time-consuming.
Absolutely. Yeah, sometimes, just to add to that, sometimes you go up against entrenched practices that have been there for heaven knows how long. And you have to basically break that down, document it, show how that can be leveraged in the new world that's coming from the automation, and how you can best take advantage of automation to make that process easier. All of those things basically work into the easier implementation of automation solutions. We run across that a lot.
So just to tag on what Arco was saying, we do have a lot of documentation and processes that's been there for years. Right? I mean, I've seen things that was done in the 1990s, and we have no idea why. When we ask the question of, can we do this, the automatic answer is no. Right? Well, why can't I do that?
Because we always have.
Because we always have done it this way, right? I think on the Fed side, that's one of the biggest kind of challenges is to just start asking the question of why, right? Why can't we do this? Is there unless there's some legal issue that we absolutely cannot do? But, from a policy standpoint, procedure standpoint, we can always look at, can we improve those? Can we optimize it? Can we modernize it right, to fit how we want to do things?
I always think of when you say it because we always have, I always think of the artillery units in Vietnam. And we don't have time for that story. We only have about 8 minutes left, but it's a great one. If anyone wants a cool anecdote to use later, I have a great one around that I'm happy to share after this. We have about 7.5 minutes left. And so we have 5 people, and give everyone about 1.5 minutes, till we run up. And to kind of close this out, once you've set those misconceptions, once you've set the expectations, once you've assuaged fears around the misconceptions, what are the most important changes you've seen? So if you have a practical success story that you can share in about 1 minute or 1.5 minutes, and then what is if you had to say, if automation is not a silver bullet, and we said that very early on, but what is the closest thing to for a project to succeed? What is the silver bullet? What is the thing that if I've got this, I've got a chance? If you've got one thing that you have to say that you can share with everybody in the room, or if you just have one cool story, one cool anecdote, and we'll just start at this end and work down if that's cool.
Yeah, so for one of our customers, we deployed OpenShift and in their development environment. I love OpenShift.
Say that louder.
But for this particular customer, they had a legacy application development environment, a very large enterprise legacy application development environment, and a software factory model, based on some complex metrics from the procurement side on how they funded that software development and change activity. So OpenShift really took a lot of the waste out of the system for us. That automation activity really removed a lot of the non-value add things our software developers were doing on the operations side of the house with regards to infrastructure provisioning, code management, sharing, deploying, the middleware tiers, managing the security. So that's the other thing that I wanted to mention from the last question actually is, for us, one of the biggest challenges in dealing with a large-scale automation project is interacting with the security teams and changing the mindset around letting the machines do more of the work and less of the work being on the people, right? So that takes a little bit of energy, but once you break that barrier, and we've done that by empowering our security teams to own some of the automations that are related to security, right? I highly recommend that practice. That breaks down a lot of cultural barriers with the security team. You're able to take a lot more waste out of the system with regards to security. So for this particular customer, from an infrastructure automation, platform automation perspective, and from a security automation perspective, we have a far more efficient dev lifecycle.
Awesome.
I think I'm going to talk a little bit about what it actually takes to be successful in this type of projects. I think as the federal government, we like to do these big wholesale transformations, right? Because it sounds good, we can get a lot of budget to support what we're doing, But at the end of the day, I think if you want to be successful, you have to start small, right? Actually pick something that you fully understand, start small, getting that thing to work, to be successful, and then you can start share that experience, and then you scale up from that point. I think that I would love to see us stop doing these billion-dollar, multi-year failures that we continue to see for the past few years. So I think the key thing for me is start small, be successful, and then scale.
Very cool. Yeah, to Evan's point, you want to start with something smaller and then expand gradually, and also involve people across the board, including security teams, early on, so that they have a voice in the matter. They also have a part to play in the final solution, as it were, and make that a continuous process improvement and work that into the organization's culture. Big things, but it can be done if you begin small and then expand outwards.
Awesome.
So you may start from the cloud, go up to data center, get the on-prem going after that. So gradually build on your successes.
Very cool.
My success story is around, we are at Red Hat. This is an Ansible story, where we actually were working with a team that was already in the cloud, but we're using cloud resources in an extremely persistent manner. The challenge they had was their UAT environment was also their performance testing environment. It was also their integration testing environment. It was environment X that essentially had to be scheduled. Again, because of the persistent nature of the use of this cloud environment, we were able to come in to help this team to essentially provide them the playbooks that they needed to give them the immutability and the idempotency to stand up that environment at any point in time and integrate that into their pipeline to do performance testing, to actually enable the UAT testers to spin up an environment that was traced back to their SCM at any point in time as well. So the efficiencies gained were actually reflected in the actual Jenkins CI server that they were using. It was great.
Yeah, that's an incredibly powerful thing. You're testing, launching your tests launches your environment. That's power right there. I don't care who's saying, that's awesome. And Justin, bring us home.
Yeah, so I would like to also point out that it wasn't the Ansible guy that broke the ice on idempotency. Thank you for that.
All right, I hoped we only said it once, but you just made it twice.
Well, true, but it also took me probably a year to figure out how to even say it properly. No, regardless, so I think that the way to be successful with automation ultimately is you have to start. And one of, to echo Evan's sentiment about we don't need $1 billion procurement here in order to be successful with it. You need to start small, and you need to start now. The only way you're going to be able to grow this, the only way you're going to ultimately be able to change your culture is by picking the types of things that you can do relatively quickly, and if you're going to fail at it, you can fail fast, and you can restart, and you can look to something else. That's the only thing that's going to allow you to broaden the scope of what it is you're able to automate, give your teams and organizations the ability to focus on the important things. Deploying a VM or even a container is not important. What's important is making sure that it meets your security policy. What's important is figuring out why a particular network port drops 5% of its traffic when it hits 85% utilization. Those are important things. Those are hard problems to solve, and those are ultimately the types of problems that your people should be solving, not, okay, well, I got another request from my customer to deploy this app or deploy this VM. So you don't have to swallow the whole nut at once. You can start with the smallest underpinnings in existing environments, and you can build on those successes in an iterative fashion, and ultimately you'll end up in a scenario where you're going to be able to change the culture of the organization and ultimately the overall mission delivery that you're performing.
That's awesome. That's a great thought. We have 45 seconds left, so I'm just kind of curious, Evan, because you brought it up initially. Start small. We don't need $1 billion procurements. How do you make it part of your? At that point, if it's not a project, then it has to be part of culture. How do you get there with the last 30 seconds? Not a hard question.
So I think from the agency standpoint, we need to give people the opportunity to actually participate in this process. I think where I've seen a lot in the past is, Monday morning we're all agile. What does that mean? giving people the opportunity to actually participate and understand what you're trying to do, right? Share the vision and give them opportunity to actually learn the right skill sets that they need to kind of be part of that process.
Awesome. I think that's the perfect. I think that's the perfect ending. Make your people part of the solution. Don't give them a job to do. Make it the culture that they want to do it in. I think that's it. So that's what we've got. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for this amazing panel. Thank you very much.